Time now for you. The Hugh Hefner interview is coming up now. You can talk about it too, it's okay.
He's the world's best-known bachelor, the guy who doesn't need any introduction. But, you know, it's interesting to note that he founded Playboy Magazine in 1953, you know, 50 years ago. And it's still so much of our pop culture, part of our history. And, well, she got the tour.
Well, Hef, thanks very much for taking the time to speak with me this afternoon. I can honestly say I never thought that I would be sitting here talking to you in my career. Thank you. 50 years of Playboy, you know, and I know you didn't even think after the first issue that there was going to be a second, or you weren't sure. Did you ever think that it would be 50 years later?
I was a kid who dreamed some wild dreams, but I could not have imagined, you know, in my wildest dreams, what was going to come out of the magazine. There was no date on that first issue because I didn't have enough money for the second. And the fact that it would, that we would be here celebrating 50th anniversary after half a century, and the impact that it's had on society is unreal. As
editor-in-chief, would you say you're working as hard today as you did 50 years ago?
No. In other words, the first 2 decades, I really was a workaholic, you know, building the company, building the empire, and would work literally around the clock. But my work is play and pleasure for me. I think, quite frankly, that if I was not working on the magazine and the company, I think that I would be aging. I think if you stop doing what you really enjoy, it is the connection for me between work and play that is part of what Playboy is all about, and kind of the definition of not only my life but also of the magazine. And I think it is a combination of the two that makes life complete.
You've been a fairly public person. Was there, you know, at some point did you think, I don't want to be this public person anymore, I just want to be a private citizen, mind my own business, go off and not have to worry about being in the public eye?
No, not in terms of public life, but I do think there was a moment in time. I think the particularly difficult time for me personally and also for the company was the 1980s. It was a very conservative time, and the moral majority, and they helped put Reagan in the White House, and we were dealing with, you know, with some opponents and enemies that were in very powerful places. The fact that we managed to weather that, and that it has all turned out so well in the last few years, of course, is quite remarkable. But I do think there was a moment in time in which I, to some extent, well, I had a stroke, a mild stroke in 1985, and that was related in a very real way to the kinds of pressures, personal and professional, that were going on in that time frame. And I think that that was part of the motivation for why I sort of escaped into the marriage. I had no notion, quite frankly, after the first marriage failed, that I would ever marry again. And I think that when I did that, it was a real change in direction for my life. And I gave it a very good try, and that relationship lasted for 10 years, and we have 2 wonderful boys, and Kimberly and the children live right next door with an open gate, and they're back and forth here every day. I was faithful to that marriage, and when it didn't work, I came out of it a little emotionally beat up and bruised. And not realizing, of course, that in the interim, a whole new generation had grown up, and as I've said before, was waiting for me to come out and play. So the last, you know, half dozen years have been, for me and for Playboy, the best years of all.
You've changed attitudes towards certainly sex, certainly women's ideas of their own bodies. Things have, so many things have changed in 50 years. And then all of a sudden there's a big brouhaha because of the Janet Jackson clothing malfunction, or whatever they're calling it these days. Did you think that was much ado about nothing, or what was your reaction when it was making headlines?
Well, I do think that it is much to do about nothing, but it is also a definition of who we are as a Puritan people. I think that that's you know, what America's all about when sex is concerned. And Playboy and its success and its impact are all related to that. And it again, is something that I've been aware of from the very early on because of my own Puritan heritage. I think that, you know, Americans as a people are, you know, fascinated and attracted to things sexual. and then they feel guilt and shame about it. And the notion that we should be upset about a bare breast on television rather than the real obscenities that exist on this planet, the war and the bigotry and the destruction of the planet itself. I mean, those are the real obscenities.
You look phenomenal. You don't look anywhere near your age. Men around the world look at you and say, wow, how do you do it? How do you have 5 girlfriends? How do you keep this going? Because they want to know.
It has to do, I think, with attitude on life. I mean, really enjoying what you're doing, taking care of yourself physically, having a right, healthy attitude on life. And, every day is an adventure for me. I look forward to every day. Tonight I'll be playing cards with my male friends and then taking my girlfriends out dancing.
You don't stop.
It's a full, and that keeps you young. It keeps you young.
Well, many more years of success. Thank you so much for talking with us.
My pleasure.
Appreciate it.
Enjoyed it very much. Thank you.
What a guy.
Yeah, it's amazing because whether or not, and we kind of said this earlier, whether or not you agree with the Playboy, the whole idea of it, here's a man who built up an empire from nothing, and basically changed the way we think of sexual ideals, and indeed a sexual revolution, which they talk. But the interesting thing is, and he mentioned his boys, he was like 13, 16, I believe. The 16-year-old was asked, and I was talking to the publicist about this one day. We know what he wanted to do, and he said, "Oh well, I'm going to run Playboy. It's not what I want to do. It's what I will do."
It's an empire.